The movie begins with Danny Moore, a motorsport marketing executive, pitching an ambitious idea to Nissan, the GT Academy, a contest where top Gran Turismo players are trained to become professional racers. Nissan agrees on one condition: safety is paramount. On the flight, Jack explains that Jan needs to place at least fourth in one race to earn his professional license and sign a contract with Nissan. Jack warns Jan that the professional racing world won't welcome him; he'll have to earn his place on his own. Danny later reveals that Jack was once a promising racer but quit under circumstances too sensitive to discuss. With newfound respect, Jack informs Jan that he made it to the final five. The next day, the remaining competitors face off in a real race. Though Jan starts in last place, he pushes himself to remember Jack's advice and treat the race like a game. Slowly, he climbs the ranks, finally crossing the finish line almost simultaneously with Maddie. That evening, Jan's brother, Kobe, convinces him to go to a party where Jan meets a woman named Audrey. The two hit it off, but the night takes a turn when the police arrive to break up the party. Jan and Kobe flee, and thanks to Jan's quick thinking and knowledge of racing, they manage to escape. However, upon returning home, they are confronted by their father. The next day, Steve takes Jan to work, using it as a life lesson, warning him that his dreams of racing will only lead to disappointment and struggle. Despite Steve's words, Jan refuses to give up, sneaking away to participate in the virtual race. Arriving just in time, Jan competes in the race as the crowd at the watches intently. Though he starts in last place, his exceptional skills help him overtake the other racers and claim victory. The next day, as Jan prepares to leave for GT Academy, Steve makes a last attempt to stop him. He fears for Jan's safety, knowing the dangers of professional racing. However, Jan reminds his father of how he once admired Jan's love for cars. Moved by his son's determination, Steve tearfully relents, accepting that Jan must follow his dream. At TGT Academy, Jan and the other competitors are awestruck by the facilities. Jack Salter, now their trainer, delivers a harsh speech, mocking the gamers and doubting their abilities. Training begins, and the players are thrown into the challenging world of real car racing. Jan, initially nervous and unprepared, struggles to adapt. His awkwardness during training and interviews catches the attention of another competitor, Maddie, who looks down on him. Over time, the academy proves grueling, both physically and mentally. Several players are eliminated, unable to handle Jack's tough training regimen. During a practice race against Maddie, Jan struggles after being blocked, failing to brake properly. Maddie taunts him afterward, bragging about his superiority. When Jack criticizes Jan for the failure, Jan insists the brakes weren't working properly. Skeptical, Jack has the car inspected and discovers Jan was right. Surprised by Jan's knowledge, Jack learns that Jan's extensive experience setting up virtual cars in Gran Turismo helped him identify the problem. With newfound respect, Jack informs Jan that he made it to the final five. The next day, the remaining competitors face off in a real race. Though Jan starts in last place, he pushes himself to remember Jack's advice and treat the race like a game. Slowly, he climbs the ranks, finally crossing the finish line almost simultaneously. On the flight, Jack explains that Jan needs to place at least fourth in one race to earn his professional license and sign a contract with Nissan. Jack warns Jan that the professional racing world won't welcome him; he'll have to earn his place on his own. Danny later reveals that Jack was once a promising racer but quit under circumstances too sensitive to discuss. The first qualifying race in Austria proves challenging for January. An unexpected exhaust failure from a car ahead of him and a low fuel situation force him into a pit stop, but he still manages to hold his own. Unfortunately, Nicholas Kappa plays dirty, tapping Jan's car and sending him into a spin, causing him to finish last. Despite the setback, Jack and Danny reassure Jan that it wasn't his fault. Over the next races, Jan continues to improve, learning from each experience. He places 23rd, then 17th, then 8th. However, in Barcelona, his car gets stuck in a gravel trap, leaving him unable to finish. By the final qualifying race in Dubai, Jan faces Kappa's dirty tactics again. In a moment of strategic brilliance, Jan slows down to escape a tight situation and speeds past Kappa, securing fourth place. Furious, Kappa crashes into another car, scattering debris that damages Jan's windshield. Forced to pit for repairs, Jan still manages to recover and finish in fourth, earning his FIA license. After confronting Kappa about his dirty driving, Jan receives the good news from Jack and Danny: he's officially a licensed professional racer. That night, Jan calls Audrey, thrilled to learn she's still interested in him. Using his signing bonus, Jan flies Audrey to Tokyo, where they reunite. At Nissan's contract signing event, Jan tries to contain his excitement when he spots Audrey arriving. Later, they go on a romantic date around Tokyo. Jan's first official race with Nissan takes place in Germany and is broadcast worldwide, with his parents anxiously watching. Jan performs exceptionally, overtaking Kappa and securing second place. However, on a high-speed section of the track, disaster strikes. Jan's car flips and crashes into the spectator area. Steve and Leslie watch in horror as the crash unfolds, and Jan is airlifted to the hospital. When Jan regains consciousness, Jack regretfully informs him that a spectator died in the accident. Overcome with guilt, Jan blames himself, but Jack and Danny remind him that racing has always been dangerous, not just for drivers but for spectators as well. Jan struggling under the weight of his guilt, despite comfort and reassurance from Audrey and his mother Leslie, who remind him that the fatal accident wasn't his fault. Jan refuses to listen. Overwhelmed, he lashes out and demands that Jack and Danny leave him alone. Jan declares that he'll never race again. Meanwhile, Jack nearly comes to blows with Nicholas Kappa, who cruelly berates him for allowing a rookie to compete alongside professionals. Frustrated but determined to help Jan overcome his fear, Jack decides to confront the young driver. He takes Jan to the racetrack where the tragic accident occurred and opens up about his past. Jack reveals that he too was involved in a fatal crash during the 24 hours of Le Mans, an incident that ultimately led him to retire. He urges Jan to face his fear and get back on the track, warning him that if he doesn't fight through this, he'll regret it for the rest of his life. Jack reminds Jan that the crash doesn't define him. What matters is how he chooses to respond. While Jack supports Jan emotionally, while Danny manages the media fallout, defending Jan's innocence. However, doubts spread in the racing world about whether sim racers belong alongside professionals. Determined to prove their worth, Danny proposes an ambitious plan: form a team to compete at Le Mans and secure a podium finish. Before committing, Jack checks on Jan's readiness for the challenge. With Jack's encouragement, Jan agrees. And the team is assembled. Jan partners with Matty Davis and Antonio Cruz, a fellow GT Academy sim driver. As preparations begin, Jan's father, Steve, visits to apologize for not supporting Jan's dreams sooner. Overcome with pride, Steve explains his fears stemmed from wanting to protect January. The two share an emotional reconciliation, healing their relationship. The 24 hours of Le Mans begins, and Jan races with precision, overtaking competitors. However, a crash triggers memories of his own accident, leaving him shaken and off pace. Jack intervenes, blasting songs from Jan's training days to snap him out of it. Frustrated but refocused, Jan recovers his drive and begins overtaking cars. Matty and Antonio complete strong stints, but Antonio's cramps force him to stop early. Jan takes over, only to face a setback from a loose wheel nut. Determined, he proposes a risky strategy using unconventional racing tactics inspired by Gran Turismo. Despite Jack and Danny's protests, Jan executes the plan flawlessly, breaking the lap record and reclaiming positions. On the final lap, Jan battles fiercely with Kappa for third place. In a nail-biting finish, Jan overtakes him. Securing a podium spot for Nissan, cheers erupt as Jan crosses the line, proving sim racers can compete with professionals. In the epilogue, the real Jan Martinborough's career highlights are shared, showcasing his success in over 200 races and his role as a stunt double for the Gran Turismo film. His journey forever bridges the gap between virtual and real-life racing, inspiring a new generation of drivers.